What's up, guys? How's it going, everybody? My name is Blitzwinger. Ladies and gentlemen, it is time for another Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart video, and today we're doing something kind of cool. We're checking out all of the characters in the game. So this game is stacked with tons and tons of iconic Ratchet and Clank characters, but in addition to that, lots of variations of those iconic characters due to the whole multi-dimensional or alternate dimension theme for this particular title. Now, with that in mind, down in the comment section below, guys, name your favorite character and the alternate dimension counterpart. Let me know. And with all that in mind, let's get rocking and rolling and take a look at our entire roster of characters. So we'll kick things off with, of course, the star of the show, Ratchet. Each one of these cards, almost in a kind of almost like, I guess, a trading card sort of way, gets a nice little bit of a background, so about maybe a paragraph to 2 paragraphs describing the character, giving you a little bit of an idea of what the character is all about, should you not know that. So you can go on ahead and, if you'd like, at all times pause the video to give that a read. Here's the actual character model, looking super duper terrific. This is, of course, the star, Ratchet. Now, the co-star is the one and only Rivet, the newly introduced character of Rivet. And obviously the counterpart to Ratchet within this particular dimension, who's looking pretty darn cool. Then we have, of course, the other titular character, which would be, of course, Clank, since he is part of Ratchet and Clank. And now, the majority of the game, he actually does not look like this because, well, maybe I shouldn't spoil things, but the majority of the game, he does not actually look like this particular character model, so it's really cool to see Clank fully completed. Then we have Kit right here, who looks really epic. Unfortunately, not in Kit's other form, but still looking pretty cool. And of course, Kit is the counterpart to Clank in this dimension. Just like Ratchet and Rivet, you get Clank and Kit. Then we have Captain Quark. Of course, the lovable, I guess. I was going to say laughable, but I guess also laughable and lovable oaf from the Ratchet and Clank universe. And then we get his counterpart, which would be Captain Quantum right here. So this is the variation where he's actually the king of all the pirates within this universe, trying to actually battle against Emperor Nefarious. So he rules the pirate faction, I guess. So he is the pirate king. Then we have Skid McMarks. He looks a lot less threatening in the regular Ratchet and Clank universe, but in Rivet's dimension, he is known as Phantom, who's a proud Resistance member. And he is epic. He's got a jetpack, and I think he might actually be the first character that Ratchet meets in this particular dimension. I think. I'm trying to remember if he meets Kit and Rivet before that, but I don't think he does. I think he comes across Phantom first, so that is very cool. Then we have Rusty Pete here, who's definitely a lot more goofy looking and has a much goofier personality in general in Ratchet and Clank's universe. But if we head over to Rivet's world, you will see Pierre Lefer. And he is a contender for being the leader of the pirates. Or I guess at some point he is, but things go a little bit awry. Let's leave it at that without spoiling things any further. Looks cool. Really neat redesign. Then we have Dr. Nefarious here, who is, of course, the main villain that Ratchet and Clank have become very much used to toppling over in their dimension. I love how they have him designed even. He's like a lot more like, you know, kind of hunched over. And he is, as much as he is a threat, he's definitely much more of a mental challenge for Ratchet and Clank because he's always coming up with some sort of piece of tech to cause them a lot of trouble. Whereas if we take a look at Emperor Nefarious, who is, of course, from Rivet's universe, he is a lot more brash and cocky, and you can see even the way that he is posed, he's kind of standing way more up high, very imperial and very threatening, a lot more like scheming Darth Vader-esque than the way that Dr. Nefarious was a lot more hunched over, almost like Dr. Octopus or something like that. So it's really cool how you get a dichotomy between the two characters in the two different dimensions. We then have Miss Zargon, who is, of course, the character whom you're going to be purchasing all your upgrades and all your weapons from throughout your adventures in Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart. Then we have the Morts. The Morts are just described as the Morts, even though there is countless Morts on the, I think it was Zaragoza, I believe is the planet that they're from. Does this actually say it? Sorry, it's Sargasso, not Zaragoza. But you do meet them, and you have quite a few tasks actually to complete on that planet, helping them out. Then, speaking of helping them out, this is also where you meet Trudy, the dragon, and she helps you out in quite a few very pivotal moments in the game, actually, when you're battling against Emperor Nefarious. And then in addition to that, there's a cool like side quest involving Trudy where you need to go on ahead and feed her favorite type of fruit on Saragosso. After that, we then move on to Gary, another side character who is quite prominent, actually. And initially, when you meet him, you don't quite realize just how prominent he will be in the story, but he makes appearances in multiple dimensions, literally, even at some point helping out Clank in an alternate dimension as well. So very, very cool. Then we have Zargon Jr., who is the host of the arena mode within the game. He will always be commentating and getting super duper stoked about the fact that you're going to be put into an epic battle. And as you can see, unless if he's battling, he is bored. Then we have Juice right here, who seems like a really, really big threat. And maybe I shouldn't clarify more than that, but this is Juice, and he is a pretty cool alien. That's all I'm going to say, because again, I don't want to specifically point out some spoilers. Now, next up after that, we have the Vollard Junk Traders. There's several of these ones that you actually see throughout. I really, really like the design for these guys. I love how much they are just obsessed with the idea of collecting junk. They have like this kind of almost like hoarder mentality, but you also can see a lot of personality just in their design. I really, really like this character design, and to be fair, I think all the characters look really cool. Speaking of a really cool character, here is the Emperor's Assistant. Now, we don't get a counter to this character in Ratchet & Clank's universe. Unfortunately, this is a character that is exclusive to just Rivet's universe, but this is the character that basically, I guess, organizes and keeps track of a lot of the tasks that Emperor Nefarious sets out to complete. A really cool design, very sleek, and I like how she has that kind of same white metal look, almost kind of like as if a robot designed by Apple. That's kind of the vibe that I'm getting. After that, we have some of our villains. So we have the Goons for Less right here. This is the sort of default looking enemy. These are the easiest of the enemies that you will fight. Then you have Nefarious Troopers, which are the most basic of enemies from Nefarious's army himself, because there's multiple factions that you battle. Then you have the Robot Space Pirates, which again is the base level villain or trooper from the pirate class or faction. That's a pretty ginormous sword, kind of almost reminded me of Final Fantasy. Then we have the Goon Rusher, who's a little bit more advanced than the previously shown Goons for Less. So this guy has obviously a big giant sword and a mallet. He's much more about melee combat than before. Then we have the Robo Mutt. These are very easy to defeat. They just sometimes try to overwhelm you in sheer numbers, but they're really, really quite simple to actually defeat. We then have the Zoom Goon. No, he's not going to be calling you on a Zoom call. This guy is all about flying, and he actually is a bit of a pain because he will jolt across the map in direct patterns to try to make himself more difficult to hit. So a bit more of a tricky enemy. Then you have the Vroom Goon, who's literally riding this epic motorcycle, which looks super duper sweet. After that, we have the Goon Dropship. Now, keep in mind, these are not to scale. So like when you look at this and then you look at this, you think like, oh my goodness, that dropship is probably very, very weak. This is actually the vehicle that the vast majority of the villains from the Nefarious army or the not the Vroom Goon, the Goons for Less squad show up in. So you will literally imagine that this thing is able to go on ahead and host 4 or 5 of those goons within it. So this is a giant ship, and this is actually one of the most difficult enemies to battle within the game. Then you have the undead goon, who show up towards the latter part of the game, and they are definitely really cool looking, just aesthetically, this zombified version of the villains you've come to expect. After that, we have the Nefarious laser trooper. These you face off quite early on. They seem a little bit threatening at the start when you don't have all that great of a loadout of weapons, but as you go through, they become very, very basic enemies to defeat. These guys definitely will give you a run for your money when you just first initially run into them. These are, of course, the Nefarious Sluggers. Then you have Nefarious Peacekeepers, who are basically this kind of tank unit that jolts around. It's actually a really, really cool enemy unit. And then you have the Nefarious Juggernaut, which initially when you're introduced to these guys, it's basically literally like a boss fight that you have to go through, and it's a bit of a challenge again. However, the interesting thing is that by the time you get to the end of the game, there will literally be points where you're fighting 3 or 4 of these guys at once, and it's not even the boss fight for that area. It's just a set of enemies for you to go on ahead and defeat. So it's kind of crazy to think how far you come in this game, where you start out with these guys as a boss fight, and then towards the latter half of the game, you're fighting 3, 4, 5 of these guys just in succession without even arriving at the boss fight yet. Now, from there, we have the Nefarious Snipe Bot. These guys are a pain because they charge up and they do a lot of damage with their snipe shots. Then you have the Nefarious Blitz Trooper. This one's my favorite. I think that you guys can figure out why this one's my favorite. Might have to do something with the word Blitz, but he looks really, really cool. Then you have the Nefarious Dropship. Again, this thing looks tiny, but it is not. It is a ginormous ship that houses a lot of Nefarious's army. So again, this is not to scale to what it actually appears like in the game. After that, we have some more pirates. So here we have the pirate Corsair with the gun. These guys are kind of a pain actually to battle because the shield is definitely not fun to get around, but they will shield a lot of your damage using the ginormous shield available to them. Here you have the Marauder. And then you have the Cutlassies, which is actually the most basic and weak of the pirate characters. After that, we have the Sand Sharks, which again are not to scale. They're actually quite tiny in the game. If there's a way to zoom out even further to really try to give you an idea of how small they are, I would. But again, this makes them seem a lot more threatening. This is actually the sand shark nest, which looks very, very, very gross here. So basically, this is the thing that spawns these guys right here in giant numbers. So that's why when you run into some sand sharks, don't worry about the sand sharks as much as you should figure out where is the sand shark nest so that you can eliminate this thing first and then shift your priorities towards taking down the sand sharks themselves. Here we have the horned toads. So by the way, starting with this enemy right here, these enemies don't belong to any factions. They're just basically wild enemies within the different planets that you visit. They don't have a faction that they belong to, unlike what we've seen before, the pirates, the goons, and Nefarious's army. So, next up after the horned toads, we also have the toxic crabs, which surprisingly are super duper tough. These guys actually do take, even later in the game when you have really good weapons already, they are actually quite tough and they take quite a bit of damage to defeat. Then you have the amoeboids, who always remind me of Slimer from the Ghostbusters movie. Then you have the puffoids, which are very, very rare. You rarely run into these enemies. Here are the sharkigators, which I honestly don't actually remember battling, aside from just basically this enemy. If you run into him, it's an insta-kill, because that means you probably dropped into an area in the water where you're not supposed to drop into, and so the shark is going to get you. After that, we have the Savali Spitters, which are pretty easy to deal with, honestly. Here, speaking of easy to deal with, here's the Fender Sax Wasps. These guys are annoying, but again, very easy to defeat. These guys, on the other hand, are not easy to defeat. These are boss fights in the game known as the Grunthors. It is a boss fight, but at some point, there will be points where they actually kind of help you out when they battle some of the other faction enemies in the game. But in general, this is going to be a pretty serious fight, and when you run into one of these, be ready to waste a lot of your ammo. Then you have the undead variation of that same Grunthor, which just looks terrifying, let's be honest. It looks like if you showed up in a Ratchet Clank museum and the skeleton section came to life. Here we have Dr. Nefarious's Party Crasher. Another enemy unit from Nefarious' army. Here's the Seekerpede, which is a ginormous boss fight in the game. Very, very, very cool vehicle. And then, of course, last but certainly not least, you have the Imperial Power-Up suit that belongs to Emperor Nefarious. So this is his big, giant Gundam costume. And again, keep in mind, guys, that this is not to scale. This thing is ginormous. Like, I would say that basically, like, you see these little claws on his hands? Like, Ratchet and Rivet are maybe the height of half that claw. So just so you get an idea of just how huge this particular enemy is. So then we have some more of the friendly characters throughout. So we've gone through mostly enemy units so far. Here we have Megalopolis Citizen. We have the Nefarious Citizen. We have the Blizzard Miners. We have the Speedle, which helps you in so many situations in the game. Such a useful character. Then you have the Plains Beast. Then you have the Antara Swarmer. The regular fish, which actually you can use as a melee weapon in the game. You have the iconic sheep, of course. A utility bot. And last but certainly not least is the Kreger Bear. So there you guys have it. That is the entire roster of characters. As you can see, you will be running across a plethora of characters with tons of different personalities and attitudes and really, really cool, unique looks. Let me know down in the comment section below which of these characters is your favorite. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I will hopefully see you here on the next one. Peace out. See you later, alligators. Bye-bye, guys.